Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Best Words. This week, we're going to start with a quote from none other than James Madison. More than a majority, in all cases where the justice or the general good might require new laws to be passed or active measures to be pursued, the fundamental principle of free government would be reversed if there was a supermajority requirement. It would be no longer the majority that would rule, the power would be transferred to the minority, and an interested minority might take advantage of it to screen themselves from equitable sacrifices to the general weal, or in particular emergencies to extort unreasonable indulgences. Federalist 58. The founding fathers knew that supermajority requirements for day to day legislation were a horrible, untenable idea. And the literal father of the Constitution, the guy who is given the most credit for writing it, James Madison, was not a fan of supermajority requirements. Fast forward to 2021. For the second time in under a month now, an extremely important piece of legislation died in the Senate, even though representatives either had the majority of the vote or representatives representing a majority of the American people, be it the January 6th Commission that we discussed on the show a few weeks ago, or the 50-50 vote now, the For the People Act, which again filibustered because it didn't have 60 votes. AOC had the smartest thing I think to say about the filibuster just today. Actually, she came out and said, "Look, the Senate. Well, I've been saying this. The Senate is already a form of filibuster. The 50 Democratic senators represent 40 million more people than the 50 Republican senators. It's not even close. It's a substantial difference in representation. In 2022, it's very likely Pennsylvania gets an extra Democratic senator. It's 50-50 chance Florida loses one. This disparity between the number of people represented by blue senators and the number of people represented by red senators is only going up. There's a conceivable scenario where the Senate is split 50-50, and Texas and Florida and Pennsylvania all have at least one Democrat in the next 4 years, and the disparity will not be 40 million, it'll be closer to 80 million. The Senate is fundamentally undemocratic, even by the rules it's supposed to operate under. And the filibuster is not one of the rules it's supposed to operate under. And it is grinding our ability, us being Democrats, progressives, whatever you want to call us, it is grinding our ability to get anything done to a halt. It is tragic. It is an emergency. And I have a lot to say, but I'm gonna kick it over to you.
All right. Cool. So I'm going to give us another quote here from statesman Alexander Hamilton.
Got shot.
Federalist Paper 22. To give a minority a negative upon the majority, which is always the case where more than a majority is requisite to a decision, is, in its tendency, to subject the sense of the greater number to that of the lesser. The necessity of unanimity in public bodies, or of something approaching towards it, has been founded upon a supposition that it would contribute to security, but its real operation is to embarrass the administration, to destroy the energy of the government, and to substitute the pleasure, caprice, or artifices of an insignificant, turbulent, or corrupt junto to the regular deliberations and decisions of a respectable majority. So like I said, Alexander Hamilton, Federalist Papers 22. So what's he saying there in Old English? Well, basically, it's minority rule over the majority, at least in the way that we're dealing with it now. Back in those days, it's kind of prescient that he said these words then, because they didn't have as much of a problem in the past with the filibuster. So Alexander Hamilton had a problem with the Articles of Confederation, which was basically the Constitution before the Constitution got ratified and approved. It passed about 4 to 5 years after the Revolutionary War, the Articles of Confederation. And then the Constitution came another 7 years later after that. Hamilton's problem with the Articles of Confederation had to do with it requiring a lot of supermajorities, something that we hear a lot about right now. And it did not give a lot of power to the federal government versus state governments. So that's why most of the founding fathers thought the Constitution would be preferable to the Articles of Confederation. So the filibuster itself is actually not in the Constitution. It's the rules of the Senate. And the reason that it actually came about was because of rule changes that happened in about 1806. So about, 20 years or so after the actual Constitution came in. And it was very infrequently used in the 18 and 1900s. So it's a lot different than what we were dealing with now. And I think just the quote itself from Hamilton was very, like I said, prescient. It's almost like you could see the future coming, or the problems that we'd be having in the future.
Yeah, and one of the things, conservatives annoy me for a million different reasons. One of which is something I call founding father fetishization. They claim to revere the Constitution and they claim to revere the founding fathers in a theological way, right? They view these things almost like they view the Bible, right? It's immutable and inerrant. But every single person who has this sort of originalism fetish is historically illiterate. You will hear conservatives say with a straight face most of the time, because they believe this to be true, that the Constitution intentionally gave more power to the state government than the federal government. And you don't hear a lot about the Articles of Confederation because, it didn't really last very long. But the Articles of Confederation was generally considered a failure. And why was it considered a failure? And what were they meeting in Philadelphia to do? To create a stronger central government. That was explicitly the mission of the Constitutional Convention, was to create a stronger central government because the Articles of Confederation was too weak to be functional at all. So yeah, they they did not try and make a weak federal government intentionally. They were explicitly trying to do the opposite. Another historical lesson that people on our side kind of are unwilling to acknowledge, or have been slow to acknowledge. Certainly your Joe Manchins and your Kristen Sinemas, and until very recently, your Joe Bidens as well. Dianne Feinstein, who needs to fucking retire. There's all these institutionalists in the Senate who say, well, it's a proud Senate tradition. It safeguards minority rights. And it's just like the filibuster has been used almost exclusively since its inception to do terrible shit. The filibuster has an ugly, almost unanimously ugly history. It is almost never been used to do anything good. There's a tiny handful of times in recent history, and we can talk about those because I have some theories about them as well, about the ACA and that.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
really, it's been used to kill civil rights and anti-lynching laws. The most of the time the filibuster has been used in history, it was done to prevent civil rights and to prevent anti-lynching laws. The Civil Rights Act that LBJ got passed in the 60s was a pretty transformational piece of legislation, but what is not often known, and if people study critical race theory, they might know this, but the ideas in it weren't particularly new. All of the ideas proposed in the Civil Rights Act had been around 30, 40 years. There were Democrats, Northern Republicans too, actually just Northern politicians in the 20s proposing basically every part of the Civil Rights Act. It was something that had been proposed by Northern senators going back at least 4 decades before the Civil Rights Act was passed. Um, and every single time something that looked like a proto Civil Rights Act came to the floor in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, Richard Russell and the Southern Democrats killed it. Conservative Southerners used the filibuster exclusively for decades to do horrible, horrible shit. Literally, the top 2 uses for it, and the third place is not even in the discussion, were killing civil rights legislation and killing anti-lynching legislation. That's it. That's the proud history of the filibuster right there. Those are the 2 things it was used for.
And that's before it even got really bad, say, with Obama's administration, right? Mitch McConnell, John Boehner. Well, Boehner was in the House, but that was before they started using the filibuster at every beck and whim. Nowadays, it's like, I filibuster. I filibuster. You don't have 60 votes, I filibuster that. And debate is completely closed down, which is actually pretty funny. that the whole well, one of the purposes of the filibuster even existing is, you're supposed to have a debate. You're supposed to talk through the issues, right? But what actually happens nowadays when you need 60 senators and you don't have a talking filibuster anymore is basically they just say, "Oh, they filibuster. We can't close the debate. We can't reach closure, right? We can't get to the 60 senator minimum to get to reach closure." And what actually winds up happening, instead of a debate happening, it just closes everything down. They're not talking about the bills that they want to pass or don't want to pass and why they do, why they don't want to do it. It just gets shut down completely. And one of the things that Republicans do nowadays with the filibuster is they're actually preventing debate from happening. And they're using it as a tactic to keep senators from having to vote on things. So that prevents them from having to put their name on a bill or for a bill or against a bill, and then having to explain that to the constituents that they represent. So one of the things that I'd like to see is a return back at least to the talking filibuster, where somebody has to actually be up at the podium keeping a debate actually going, a back and forth between both sides. I know right nowadays our government is basically one side, with a few good people sprinkled in here and there. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think it's un it's undebatable. It is the bare minimum. It's the bare minimum. As it stands now, we have a recipe for dysfunction that is destroying the country and making it impossible for the majority to impact their will. Like you said, the cost of doing a filibuster has decreased dramatically. We have deflation in the filibuster market. It used to be expensive to filibuster. It used to take a lot of your time and a lot of your effort. It used to take a lot from you physically. It used to take a lot from the whole caucus, right? Like you guys won the team, say the Southern Conservatives, they had to be super committed to a cause, to filibuster.
Yeah. You had to
Um,
have commitment to that cause. You had to be there in person for it to happen. Nowadays, it's like an email.
yeah, and I am traditionally one of the feedback I get sometimes from this show and other forums is that I'm too hard on the Democrats, and I think that I'm sorry, but I'm gonna aim this one right at Chuck Schumer. Like the filibuster, you can't get rid of the filibuster. There's too many institutionalists. The Howes in Washington and the establishment in the Beltway would be too great for you. Okay, you don't have to get rid of the filibuster. You have to make it expensive to do a filibuster. And Manchin and Sinema both agreed in theory to that. So the fact that they're not even making it hard to filibuster, that's squarely on the people who are that's entirely on Chuck Schumer, honestly. And as much as Chuck Schumer, I think, has improved in the era of Trump, I think he's. I don't know if he's not ruthless enough to do this, or I mean, it's not a matter of intelligence. He's definitely smart enough, so he's either not ruthless enough, he's not tough enough, or he secretly loves the dysfunction. And I'm not a fan of this line of reasoning you hear a lot from our side that Democrats secretly love the Republican agenda, and that's why they act like fucking idiots who can't oppose them. But then you look at something like this with Schumer not reforming the filibuster, and it's really tough to draw any other conclusion. Like, you know what? Fine, don't abolish it, just reform it, because the costs of the filibuster are next to nothing now. Yeah, and the other thing is you don't have to put your name if you're a horrible conservative on bullshit legislation anymore. And that's goes to the heart of why we shouldn't fear getting rid of the filibuster.
Mm.
Um,
Well, yeah, right. There is no price to it right now. There used to be a price, and it doesn't exist anymore.
yeah, and without the filibuster, say, AOC hit on this the other day. So they're just going to take away our good works in 3 years. It's democracy. If the Republicans want to, we say we pass universal health care, they're going to come in 3 years and dismantle it. They're going to lose badly. Like that's a recipe for disaster. Inaction benefits Republicans.
Right.
Passing popular things benefits Democrats. And this notion that if we don't have it, we wouldn't have been able to save the ACA. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a particular example that gets under my skin for a couple reasons. Like, yes, we did filibuster to save the ACA, but I think one has to remember that the Republican caucus is split into You're kind of calculating villains, your Mitch McConnells,
Right.
and your
Well,
true believers.
you got your Tea Party remnants as well.
Yeah, like Ron Johnson is a true believing moron. I don't think that guy is particularly smart. I think he is particularly crooked, and probably, well, not a Ron Johnson fan over here. But Mitch McConnell represents Kentucky. Now, which state has the highest percentage of its population on Obamacare? Kentucky. Um, does he really want to be the guy who takes away 40% of the people in Kentucky's health care? No. He's happy to run against Obamacare, but when they can't get past the finish line and actually take away people's health care, that's win-win for Mitch McConnell. He gets to be against it, and a lot of his constituents, I'm sorry, are idiots. There's a lot of people in Kentucky who hate Obama. You know, I feel bad saying that, like I'm some East Coast elitist, but there's a lot of people in Kentucky who hate Obamacare because it's called Connect there, the KY Connect,
Right.
um, who don't realize they're on the ACA. Not insubstantial percentage of the people in Kentucky get their health care through the ACA and don't know it, and they hate quote unquote Obamacare, and they vote for people who are going to get rid of Obamacare, even though they're on Obamacare. And if McConnell actually pulled the trigger and got rid of people's health care and kicked 1 million Kentuckians off health insurance, the consequences for his career would be disastrous. He didn't really want to do it. They just want to run against it.
Yeah.
And so they say, like, oh, without the filibuster, we would have lost the ACA. It's like, can you imagine
Well, let
if
them
we
run
put
against
them,
that.
let them take away people's health care, let them
That's the thing.
take away
Yeah,
people's Social Security?
Chucky, you got to fight sometimes, buddy. Sorry, it's not always going to be easy. But when it
Yeah,
comes to like Chuck Schumer, I can't possibly know what's in somebody's head. I can't know what he's thinking. I can only judge them based on the actions that they do, right? And I'm telling you, I don't want to be super hard on the people on our side. I don't know if the Democrats are really on our side, but um, he has consistently just proven, at least to me, to be both spineless in some ways, but then also, yeah, I think he likes having the filibuster for, just chaos to happen in the Senate and nothing to happen. I'm not sure that he's that much different from Mitch McConnell, maybe a little less evil. Um, but it's like the whole thing with Hillary Clinton saying she had a private position and a public position on something. I'm sure in private, Chuck Schumer, he just seems to love the filibuster. I don't know if it's for saving things like the ACA or, like we were saying before, having just a chaotic Senate where nothing gets done, really.
that's okay. While you think of it, I actually have a Hillary Clinton anecdote that is relevant to this and kind of infuriating. I know for a fact, surprise, surprise, she supported gay marriage long before she did publicly. I know someone who I know for many years who was very openly gay and worked on her campaign and was very high up for his age in the Clinton world, close enough to actually know her, not just report to someone who knew her personally, and is openly gay. And so she supported gay marriage in private years before she supported it publicly. And I don't know for a fact with Obama, but I strongly suspect that was the case with him too. So they do have private and public positions, and sometimes with some of these social issues, with marijuana and gay marriage, they agree with us, but they're just afraid to go there. And I think with some of the fiscal stuff, Medicare for all, taxing the rich, wealth tax, they might play they might play the game and provide lip service, but they're actually not on our side.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. But I know we're kind of running short on time here. If we wanted to talk about a few things like the things in the Constitution that actually required a 2/3 vote, uh, but it's up
And
to you.
why, right? Yeah, no, well, this is such, really quickly, right? It's what? It's
Well,
treaties,
I'll
it's
go through. I'll go through the whole. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, I could just like read the whole list. Impeachment, for good reason, I think. Expelling
yeah.
a Congress member, overriding vetoes, ratifying treaties, and proposing constitutional amendments. And when you think of these things, these are like can be super chaotic, right? There's a real reason why you would want 60 out of 100 people to vote for this or be behind something like this, impeaching a president. getting rid of a fellow Congress member, overriding a veto. So the president has the veto. Obviously, if it's under 60 votes, I mean, we never even get to see it anymore because the filibuster is always happening. Ratifying treaties, I think, obviously, like something with other countries, foreign policy, you should have to have, a large vote for something. And constitutional amendments, basically one of the largest changes of law that we can even propose, should need that many people. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, all of those are of a type. They are all of a type where, yes, like near unanimity, should be necessary. But these are all drastic things, uh, drastic and contentious, and they are all of which, they're all different from each other, but they all have something in common, and that is they are not day-to-day legislative changes. The Republicans have now put us in a position where you need 60 votes to do anything that we want to do, but not to confirm judges because that's what they care about. And now we have this rule where we can, pass things through reconciliation with a majority, but you can only use reconciliation sometimes, and but you can use it for tax cuts. So the only things Republicans care about are judges and tax cuts, both of which cannot be filibustered. So the filibuster is a tool that historically has only been used for evil, and in 2021 makes it impossible for Democrats to enact their agenda, but if the shoe was on the other foot, would not stop the Republicans from enacting their agenda.
Exactly. And how much of that is by mistake or on purpose? I don't believe in coincidences. So, but if I could just end kind of my points here, just relate it to some news that's happening right now in Florida. They just had that condo building collapse, and in the midst of this, Joe Biden is trying to pass his infrastructure bill. Right? We have the filibuster to worry about that. We have to worry about the filibuster for this infrastructure bill. And I just think it was, thinking about what happened in Florida right now, thinking about how terrible our infrastructure is in general, and how a couple of people, 10 people not willing to, vote for, so we get 60 senators on our side, can really do actual damage to people's lives. I don't want to go too far and be like, oh, look, something like in Florida, the building codes weren't, inspections weren't happening, whatever. Just relating that to some news that's happening right now and how the filibuster actually has an effect on people. Us not being able to pass bills, in a timely manner, it actually affects people's lives. And I don't know, it's a little depressing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a religious person by any stretch, but a pedestrian bridge collapsed in Washington, D.C. last week due to years of poor, non-existent maintenance. I mean, the infrastructure is literally falling in near the Capitol in a rich neighborhood. A pedestrian bridge fell onto a highway in DC. If that's not a sign.
Yeah, it's just the thing. Like, we can't have a gridlocked government that just can't get anything done. The Republicans might have their little fun not wanting to actually govern, and they just want to pass tax cuts every time they could, make it so Democrats are unenthused enough to not come vote. But this stuff has actual real consequences to people, and I just want everybody to remember that. Take that with you tonight.